Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. We're actually picking up this week's She'ur in the middle of a parak, or towards the end of a parak, in parak Chav Zayin. Parak Tetvav, Pasuk Chav Zayin, in Sefer Melachim Bet, verse 27. Now, if you recall, where we had been in this little journey of parak Tetvav is actually dealing with a vast range of kings. It is bookended by 2 kings of Yehuda, and in the middle there are 5 kings of the northern kingdom of Yisrael, which is indicative of the fact that we're beginning to witness the um, destruction of the north, in the sense that there is one dynasty after the next, there is one uprising and murder after the next, and there isn't that sense of stability that you would have expected in a normal monarchy, and that pretty much we witness in the South, even though not everything goes well in the South. And so we pick up with the name of the next king, which is similar to the previous king. The previous king had been Pekachiah ben Menachem, and Pekachiah ben Menachem, unfortunately, was the subject of a coup by one of his senior officials, his shalish. The king, the shalish's name was Pekach ben Remaliah. And so we pick up, and I'm not dealing in this She'ur nor in the previous She'ur on some of the questions of chronology, which are major issues for historians and also for the Meforshim, because there are some discrepancies when you look at the numbers. The simple answer that most assume, by the way, is that there were overlapping monarchies. We have seen this before, where a son may have started earlier in the time of his father, or even where there may have been a monarchy in Transjordan that was transferred over to the major portion, to the core portion of Eretz Yisrael, and we count from different places of those reigns. But in this case, we say Bishnat 52 Shana LaAzariah Melech Yehuda, in the 52nd year of Azariah, we also know as Uziyahu, Malach Pekach ben Remaliah al Yisrael b'Shomron Esrim Shana. The upstart, the Shalish, Pekach ben Remaliah, ruled for 20 years. Vayas hara b'nei Hashem losar min chatot Yeravam ben Nevat asher achti et Yisrael, and he did what was evil. He didn't move away from those things that Yeravam had done to cause the Jews to sin. B'yemei Pekach, and in his time, Melech Yisrael bad Tiglat Pileser Melech Ashur. Along came Tiglat Pileser. Now this is Tiglat Pileser the third. We have documents. In fact, I shared some of them with you, and we'll see what it says. Vayikach, and Tiglat Pileser ended up conquering et Iyun ve'et Avel Beit Ma'acha, the cities of Iyun and Avel Beit Ma'acha, ve'et Yanoach, and also the city Yanoach, ve'et Kedesh, ve'et Chatzor. He conquered these 5 cities. These 5 cities, as you may have noticed on the map that I had sent over to you, and just pull up the map in a second, in that map, I just have to find where I put it. In that map, okay, excuse me 1 second, we'll get it. In that map, if you notice, these are all cities in the north that you have here. Iyun is right here. Evel Beit Ma'acha you have right below it. Yanoach, we're really not 100% sure where it is, but the proposal of the Dat Mikra is it's right there. Kedesh, Kedesh as well is in this region, right here. Chatzor, we know. We actually have Tel Chatzor, we have today. And then he also conquered Gilad, which is a region. The region is Transjordan. This is the Gilad in this area. And Et HaGlila, and he also conquered the Glila, which we would refer to as the Galil in general, this space here. Eretz Naphtali, the land of Naphtali, and Naphtali's tribe was right up here, as you see over there. Vayaglem Ashura. And Tiglath-Pileser III did what Tiglath-Pileser III did, and that was the population exchange. He took those people from the north of Eretz Yisrael and he transported them into Ashur. When he did so, Rashi in Sefer Yeshayahu in Perek Chet identifies this event as actually the third event that would occur in the time of the third exile that would occur by the Assyrians, leading up to the great exile of the northern kingdom itself. As Rashi notes in Yeshayahu Perek Chet Pasuk Chav Gimel Kolomu Af La'asher Mutzak Lam, that explains Rashi Ki Melech Ashur Asher Nitan Lemutzach U'Lahatzar La L'Artzachem, the king of Ashur who was brought about to cause evil and to problems for your country, Eino Ayef, will not in any way be tired of Eino Atzel, and will not in any way stop his work. He'll be lazy. Milavo alehem ad shalosh pamim, up to 3 times. Kilo mu'af, he will not be the one who is tired. Lasher mutzak la, to cause you this trouble. Achat b'imei Pekach, the first will occur during this time of Pekach ben Remaliah. ויקח את עיון ואת אבל ואת מערכה ואת ינוח ואת קדש ואת חצור ואת הגלעד ואת הגליל לכל ארץ נפתלי, והגלות ההיא בשנת ד' לאחז. And this is occurring in the 4th year of Achaz. This was the first of the 3 exiles leading up to the great exile, which is going to happen in the 6th year of Chizkiyahu, already in the time of Hoshea of the north. And then Rashi explains the other 2 that are going to be coming in those times, and those are the next 2 paragraphs. So this statement of the Navi, where he says that he took the people over, Vayaglem Ashur, he took them to Ashur, we know 2 things. That after he conquered the northern portion of Eretz Yisrael, he did a population exchange. Part of that population exchange was not a simple kind of thing, because part of that population exchange included bringing people from Ashur over, and in addition to bringing the people of Ashur over, taking the people from Eretz Yisrael, and in that case, unfortunately, having them the first of the lost 10 tribes that we refer to in history. Those people themselves, though, also we know a little bit more about them. And so as a result, I sent you yet another document, which I labeled the Assyrian Document. Hopefully you received it. I'm just going to pull it up to go over with you briefly. This is a document. That is actually found in the London Museum today, the British Museum in London. And what we see in it is a small section of that document itself that actually talks about this exile. And so the bottom is the cuneiform. If anyone is familiar enough with cuneiform or how to read it, kol hakavod lachem. I'm not, obviously, but the top is the translation. And if you look, there's a translation on the top portion. You'll notice in the highlighted pieces in the transcription of it, this section over here, you'll notice there are numbers. And those numbers actually translate to the number of people who were taken away in this time of Tiglath-Pileser from various cities. He counts the various cities where he took people. And so you see, for example, in the cuneiform, these symbols down here, they represent 50. And so you have the 50 and the 50 from these 2 different cities that occurred. This symbol represents the 6 as well. Okay, the 25 is actually over here that you'll find in that piece. And so we see there were 3 cities where he took 625 people. He took another 650 people. He took another 650 people. Based on the documents that we have available to ourselves from archaeologists, we know that in this exile, Tiglath-Pileser claimed, at least, to have exiled 13,520 Jews from the northern kingdom of Israel. So it was not a small piece of what occurred. This was a massive defeat of the North. Yeah, Yafa.
Now, where does it say that there was an exchange? I understand that there was an exile, but where's the exchange written?
Oh, the exchange is something we know that he did. And that was his process. That actually I dealt with a little bit last week as well, based on historical documents. That's the way, that was his operation. That was what um, I had shared with you Tadmur's article from the Ben Sasson history,
Okay.
where we have other documents to that effect. It was his chiddush
Hmm.
in conquests, and it was something unfortunately that he did. We find it at the end of the picture when Ezra and Nehemiah are coming back, and we encounter the Gerei Arayot, those people who were in the area of the northern kingdom who had converted because of the fact that they were afraid of lions attacking them, and they began to worship the god of the region, which was not uncommon. So we know it happens, but we don't see it happening within this text itself.
Rabbi, is Assyria modern day Syria?
Assyria is part of Syria and already moving over into Iran, Iraq areas. Okay. So, and by the way, the empire, at the end of the day, the empire also went all the way into Eretz Yisrael. The Assyrians, by the way, as terrible as it is to say, they bequeath to us certain things that we accept as Jewish. For example, we have their alphabet. Okay, the alphabet that we learn, that we're reading, is the Assyrian alphabet. We took that back with us at the time of the Galut. And in fact, there's a whole debate. There's a famous debate. Menachem Kasher has an essay on this in his Torah Shlema, whether or not the first Sefer Torah was written in Ktav Ashurit or Ktav Ivri. Was it written in what we call the Old Hebrew, or was it written in the Assyrian script? Same thing about, by the way, there's a machloket Bavli in Yerushalmi of regarding the Luchot, or the Ten Commandments. There's a great piece about it in the Bavli. We learn that the Mem Shabaluchot B'nei Sayomed, it's Mem and Samach B'Luchot B'nei Sayomdim, that the final Mem and the Samach, which are both closed figures, that on the Luchot, which were carved all the way through and through, from back to front. One of the miracles was you could read it either side, but the centerpiece of it, like the center part of the O of the Samach, was floating in air. In the Yerushalmi, it doesn't say Mem and Samach, it talks about the Dalid, because in Old Hebrew, the Dalid was a triangle. The Dalid, think about it for a minute, Dalid comes from the word Delet. They're the same place. So the doorway of a tent is a triangle shape. And that's the Dalit or Delta or a D. All of those letters we have are related. And there in the Yerushalmi, it says that center part of the Dalit was what was floating in the air. So we're not even sure, but we do know that the letter, we refer to it, the Chazal refer to it, our alphabet is Ktav Ashurit. It's the Assyrian alphabet that we use. And that exile had massive implications about Jewish ritual, Jewish performance, Jewish belief, etc. The Assyrians at that time. So Vayaglem Ashur, they were taken into Ashur. This is a massive defeat, and as a result, and not surprisingly, Vayikshar Kesher Hoshea ben Elal Pekach ben Remaliah. So the person who had been the rebel once upon a time, 20 years earlier, Pekach ben Remaliah, who suffered this massive defeat at the hands of Tiglat-Pileser III, he now is the subject of another coup. And Hoshea comes up. Vayakeu v'yamiteu, and they murder him. Vayimloch tachtav, and Hoshea ben Ela now rules in his stead. B'shnat esrim liYotam ben Uziel, in the 20th year of Yotam ben Uziel. V'yeter divrei Pekach v'chol asher asa, and all of the rest of the things that he did. Hinam ktuvim al sefer divrei yamim l'malchei Yisrael. They're written in the annals of the Jewish people, of the kings of the Jewish people. Pasuk Lamed Bet. Bishnat Shtayim lepekach ben Remaliah melech Yisrael malach Yotam ben Uziah melech Yudam. We're now going from the north and into the south. Uziel, if you remember last week when we read in Divrei Yamim, and some of you remember the song, and in fact, Joel and Jenny Jacobson shared with me a famous recording of it last week. There's Vayiven Uziel Migdalim Yerushalayim. Okay, Uziel was this great builder. He was a righteous king. He made some mistakes. His son Yotam takes over after him. Ben Esrim v'chamesh shana haya b'malcho. He was 25 years when he began his reign. B'sheshes shana malach b'Yerushalayim, and he ruled for 16 years in Yerushalayim. V'shem imo Yerusha bat Tzadok, and his mother's name was Yerusha bat Tzadok. Whenever you hear the name Tzadok, you begin to question, was his mother from the family of Kohanim? Tzadok is a famous family of Kohanim. In fact, later in Jewish history, we have the group called the Saddukim, the Sadducees. They were the followers of Tzadok. And the Kohanim and the rest of the people, the Perushim, who we are descended of, the Pharisees, there was this great debate over who has rights to Torah. Is Torah something that everyone has a right to, or is Torah something that is guarded by the priestly class? Vayas hayashar b'nei Hashem, and he did what was right in the eyes of God. Kechol asher asa Uziyahu aviv asa. He did everything that Uziyahu, his father, did. In fact, Rashi and Divrei Yamim, Bet, Perek Chav Zayin, Pasuk Bet, goes a step further. And Rashi, in quoting a Medrash, what he ultimately says is that Yotam was so great, and I'm just going to quote Rashi, Shebechol hamelachim shelefanav u'la'acharav matzinu b'hem chet. Every other king who ever ruled over the Jewish people, we found sin. However, chutz mi Yotam, Yotam had no sin whatsoever, which is going to be a little bit problematic for us in a moment when we continue reading on how is it possible he had no sin. But saying that, rak habamot lo saru od ha'am zabchimu mikatrim babamot. And this is where it's a little bit complicated. He never got rid of the bamot. Now, if you don't get rid of the bamot, and bamot, the personal altars, and the bamot are supposed to have been put aside in the time of the second Beit HaMikdash, how do you say that he didn't do anything wrong? A little bit complicated of that, obviously, and it's something we're going to have to talk about in just a second. Hu banat shar Beit Hashem ha'elyon. He, to his credit though, he also built the Shar Beit Hashem Elyon, the upper gate to the Beit HaMikdash. Now, the question is, what was the upper gate to the Beit HaMikdash? And it is strange because there was a northern gate to the Beit HaMikdash leading up to Binyamin. This isn't something that he created for the very first time. And so what could it possibly mean? So the Radak takes the approach that what this means is he added to it. He made it better. He strengthened it. He did something to this northern gate to the Beit HaMikdash that allowed greater access. Interestingly, if you think about the northern gate to the Beit HaMikdash, that would also mean that if you're looking at the northern gate, you're looking at this idea of people coming from the north, and who would normally be coming from the north? Well, that would also be people of the northern kingdom, let's not forget. So there are a lot of fascinating things that go along with this piece as well. Having gone that far, the Malbim says that what he did is actually he built up buildings all around this northern gate. These were major government royal buildings that he created along the northern gate, and this is why he's given credit. It's strengthening, it's going a step further than his father did. Now, in Divrei Yamim, there's one more piece that's added in, that as great as he was, Divrei Yamim reports, Rak lo ba elechal Hashem, that Yotam didn't enter into the Beit HaMikdash, which sounds very, very strange. But the Radak explains, because if you remember Uziyahu from last week, he went in and he wanted to offer his own ketoret. He wanted to offer his own incense offering. And Yotam learned the lesson. Now, the way the Radak takes it is that he never went in, one way, he never went in to offer these offerings because he learned from his father. The other possibility is he literally stayed outside the Beit HaMikdash. He, as a king, never entered the Beit HaMikdash, which is hard to imagine because there were specific roles that a king had to have in the Beit HaMikdash. The time of the Yovel, now it could be he wasn't there at that time, but the king normally had a role in the Beit HaMikdash. And according to the Radak, it ties in with the statement that had been Rak habamot lo saru od ha'am mezabchim u'mekatrim, or as Divrei Yamim refers to the fact that the people were still offering on bamot, v'od ha'am mashchitim, they're actually doing the wrong thing. According to the Radak, Yotam would offer his korbanot on bamot instead of risking himself his role of going into the Beit HaMikdash. That was a place he didn't want to enter whatsoever. So you have two possibilities of what that means. He didn't go into the Beit HaMikdash. They don't necessarily jive with what Rashi reports on a medrash, that he was so great he never sinned, because if he never sinned, how did he allow the bamot to remain? And at the very same time, maybe we could say he didn't sin actively. He was passive on that piece of what was happening among the Jewish people. But if we take the Radak's position, then it really gets complicated. The second position of the Radak, that he himself was using the bamot, and the fact that there is a contradiction between understandings is not a problem. It's just a reality that we're not really sure of that piece. V'yeter divrei Yotam asher asam haloim ktuvim al sefer divrei yamim l'malchei Yehuda. Everything else about Yotam, it's found in the Divrei Yamim, the Chronicles of the Kings of Yehuda, by Yamim Ahem. Now, this is a foreshadow, and we'll see it in more detail in a number of sources, which I already shared with you as well. In those days, Hachel Hashem lahashliach b'Yehuda ritzin melech Aram v'et Pekach ben Remaliah. At that time, the king of Aram is centered around Damascus. Aram begins to attack in alliance with the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom. Vayishkav Yotam im avotav v'yikaver im avotav b'ir David aviv v'yimloch Achaz b'no tachtav, and in his place Achaz, his son, is going to rule. Now, to understand the geopolitical pieces of this time, in the days of Tiglath-Pileser, we begin to see the rise of Assyria into a global superpower. That global superpower is a power that begins to extend into and down towards Mitzrayim. Eretz Yisrael is a key place for everyone. It is along the main route of commerce. And Eretz Yisrael, as a result, has always been at the center of global conflict. What's happening here is Tiglath-Pileser is a superpower. There are many other powers that determine that the only way they'll be able to fight back Tiglath-Pileser is if they create coalitions. The coalition of the north, okay, in this case, Pekach ben Remaliah, who we've already read about, has been killed. Okay, but Pekach ben Remaliah created an alliance with Ritzin. We'll see that part of their alliance also included the Plishtim and also included Edom. And so if you look at the map of Eretz Yisrael, and I'm going to go back again to that map that I had shown you a couple of moments ago. If you look at this map, excuse me, give me 1 second. What you'll see on the map, let me just get the whole page in here. What you'll see in the map is Aram is up here. Pekach ben Remaliah is here. Edom is down here, and Plishtim are over here. And so basically almost all four areas, and by the way, this area of the Gilad, okay, just don't forget, this area of the Gilad, until it's captured by Assyria, is part of Eretz Yisrael. So this little piece of Yehuda, which is down here, on all sides is going to be attacked for the reason that they're not willing to enter into an alliance against the mighty Ashur. We see the north coming against them in cooperation with Aram. Divrei Yamim is going to tell us also the Plishtim were part of this, and also Edom was part of this as well. And that's the picture that we pick up on in the very next parak, in Parak Tet Zayin.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
How much of this, these alliances create a situation of Jew against Jew?
Well, tremendous. The northern kingdom is Jew against Jew.
But the northern kingdom didn't totally exist at this point.
No, the northern this is Pekach Remaliah. This is before the Assyrian first exile. We're jumping back into history at this point.
So there is an element here of Jew v. Jew.
There's definitely an element of Jew against Jew, and it is going to get messy.
So, Rabbi?
Yeah.
I just, did at any point where, like, the South, were they supposed to not go against Ashur? Like, what are the Nevi'im, are they having any?
So that's perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. That's what we're going to be talking about in just a minute, because the Nevi'im, because Yeshayahu HaNavi plays a role in all of this and jumps into this story as well. Okay, so we'll be dealing with that in just a minute. So thank you for the perfect intro. Now, I just want to let's move over to Parak Tet Zayin, and let's get started a little bit with the story in Parak Tet Zayin. Okay, 1 second. Okay. Here we go. Bishnat Shevasrei Shana LePekach ben Remaliah. Remember, we jumped back in history because in Parak Tet Vav we had read about the assassination of Pekach ben Remaliah after his defeat at the hands of Tiglath-Pileser III, that Hoshea ben Elam had murdered him in a coup. But this is still when he's ruling. Malach Achaz ben Yotam Melech Yehuda. Achaz ben Yotam is now the king in the south. Ben Esrim Shana Achaz b'malcho, v'shesh esrei Shana Malach b'Yerushalayim. He was 20 years old when he became king, and he ruled for 16 years in Yerushalayim. Velo asa hayashar b'nei Hashem Elokav keDavid Aviv. And he didn't do like David, his forefather, had done. He didn't do what was right in the eyes of God. Now, if you want to talk about what's not right in the eyes of God, that is the understatement of the century. Why? Because it says, Vayelech baderech malchei Yisrael. He followed the paths of the kings of the north. V'gam et beno ha'evir ba'esh. And he took his son, and he used his son as an object of worship for the Molech. This is La'avir Ba'esh. I'll deal with it in a minute. He passed him through fire, whether he sacrificed him or just participated in a ritual of passing him through fire. He did. Kitoavot hagoyim asher horish Hashem otam, like the goyim did, from whom we had inherited the land of Israel. Mipnei bnei Yisrael. Vayizbach vayakter babamot v'alagvaot v'tachat kol eitz ra'anan. And not just that, he went ahead and he violated one other piece, and this is specifically that we talk about in Chumash, that they would go ahead and they would worship Alag Va'ot V'tachat Kol Eish Ranan over every beautiful shady tree around. He continued to do these things. Az Ya'aleh Ritzin Melech Aram Ufekach ben Remaliah Melech Yisrael Yerushalayim L'Milchama. They attacked him, this alliance of the northern king and the Aramean king of Ritzin attacked him in Yerushalayim. Vayatzur al Achaz v'lo yachlu lilachem. And they went ahead and they laid siege against Achaz, and they were not able to conquer the city. Ve'etahi, and I'm just jumping ahead, and I'm going to go back to all of these psukim again because they'll be important to us. Heshiv Ritzin melech Aram et Elat la'Aram. Ritzin, who was the king of Damascus, returned Elat to Aram. Now Elat had been built up, had been recaptured and built by Uzziah, great grandfather, and at this point, he recaptured it. Now, whether he captured it for himself or he captured it for one of the southern kingdoms would probably be for Edom. Vayinashel et Hayudim Melot, and he exiled all the Jews from Melot. Va'adomim ba'u Elat, and Edom came to Elat. Vayeshvu sham ad hayom hazeh, and they live there until now. Okay, let's go back a minute and try to understand specifically how bad Achaz was. So I'm going to start with a medrash. The medrash, I don't believe I sent it to you. I apologize, but the medrash is in Breshit Rabbah, Perek Membet, Piska Gimel, and I'm going to bring it on the screen right now. Vayihi b'mei Achaz. It was in the times of Achaz. Now, this Vayihi b'mei Achaz is actually quoting from Yeshayahu that we're going to learn. But whenever you have the phrase Vayihi b'mei, we're all familiar with the Gemara in Megillah talks. Anytime it says Vayihi b'mei, eno ela lashon tsar. It's only going to mean something bad is going to happen. Vayihi b'mei Achashverosh, etc. And the Medrash goes through, just as the Gemara in Megillah does, all of these different instances in Tanakh where it says Vayihi b'mei. And the Medrash says Vayihi b'mei Achaz. It was in the time of Achaz. Matzarai Tasham. What was the tzoros then? Aram mikedem u'Flishtim me'achor. The answer was that there was Aram to the east and the Plishtim to the west. Mashal leven sarim sheniz daveglo pedagogo lavito. And what is this compared to? It's compared to a king who gives him over to a teacher, but the teacher, the pedagogue, hates the king's son. And he wants to kill the king's son. Amar imani horgo achshav. So the pedagogue, what a great teacher, says, if I kill him now, et chayev mita l'sar, I'm going to be killed. Ela hareini moshech minikato mimeno uma'atzmo humet. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take his nursemaid away from him, and he'll die on his own. Kach amar Achaz. So said Achaz. Im ein gdiyim ein tayashim. If there's not going to be any goats, there won't be rams. Im ein tayashim ein tzon. If there are no rams, there aren't going to be sheep. Im ein tzon ein ro'eh. If there's no sheep, there's not going to be a shepherd. Im ein ro'eh ein olam. And if there's no shepherd, there's no world. What does this mean? Kach haya savur b'da'ato lomar. And this is what Achaz decided to do. Im ein ktanim ein talmidim. If I can somehow make sure that there are no young students, there won't be any Talmidei Chachamim. Im ein Talmidim ein Chachamim, then you won't have wise people. Im ein Chachamim ein Zkenim, then you won't have the elders. Im ein Zkenim ein Neviim, if you don't have elders, you're not going to have prophets. Im ein Neviim ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu mashre shchinato alehem. And if there's no prophets, then God has nowhere to bring his shchina to. And as a result, what Achaz tried to do was Achaz tried to destroy the educational system of Klal Yisrael. And he took away the schools to make sure that there would be no future of Judaism.
It's like the murder of all of the Kohanim and Nov. Also, she didn't like the Kohanim, so kill them.
Well, I would go a step further. This is much more insidious. This starts slower, and it's a longer term process, and it's a process that, as a result, you don't necessarily feel in the same way. The murder of Kohanei Nov was known, it was a murder. It was a bloodbath. So, for example, I was just listening to a lecture about Reb Nachum Rabinovich. Reb Nachum Rabinovich, who passed away this year, Zatzali. He was the Rosh Yeshiva Ma'ale Adumim, the principal of Jews College, a rabbi in Toronto and in Charleston, etc., a PhD in math, an amazing posek. One of the things that he was very critical of our community going back into the 70s is the fact that everything we should be doing ultimately should be focused on increasing Torah learning. Whether it's going to college, Torah learning, etc. Torah has to be the focus of everything. Here, what he tried to do is slowly remove that aspect of Torah from the Jewish community by making sure that you raise a generation of Torah ignorant children who will then be a generation of Torah ignorant adults. And ultimately, HaKadosh Baruch Hu won't have a place in this world because there'll be no one for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to talk to. That's the beginning of trying to understand how bad he was. Now, to go back to some of the specifics, and then we're going to go into a couple of other Nevi'im. The specifics, if you remember, we said the first thing he did was he passed his son through the fire of the Molech. This goes back to Pasuk Gimel. Now, he did that. Exactly what did he do? The Gemara, there's a machloket rishonim, exactly what was the service of Molech. According to Rashi in Sanhedrin, Rashi says that what you did was it was a ceremony, and there were these large bonfires, and a priest would not sacrifice the child, killing the child, but this pagan priest would pass the child between two large fires. It was a different kind of trial by fire than we imagine, but it was passing him through them. Now, what the Ramban talks about on Vayikra is that the priest would actually take the child and pass him over the fire and then hand back to the father. The Malbim, however, disagrees. In Achron, the Malbim says that actually he put him into the fire, and this is based on the text in Divrei Hayamim, where it says Ve'av eret banav be'esh, that his sons were actually passed through the fire. But all of these are the most despicable form of Avodah Zarah that we've identified. We know where this took place. We know this took place in Gei Ben Hinnom, outside of the old city. The Gei Ben Hinnom is what gave the name to Gehenna. Okay, the Valley of Hinnom is where they would practice Molech worship. I don't know if it's appropriate or not. If you can picture when you come down from Har Zion, if you're driving back from the Kotel on the outside of the walls, all the way at the bottom, you hit a stoplight. And if you go to the left, you're going back up outside the city, like by the railroad station, before the railroad station to Derech Hebron. If you go right, you go to Derech Yafo. That stoplight is right there at that valley. On one side is Gei Ben Hinnom. On the other side nowadays is this amphitheater for rock concerts. I'm not sure which one is more hellish at times, but both of them are there in that Gei Ben Hinnom. And the idea is that this was Gehenna for us. This was hell. If a Jew wanted to have a picture of what hell was, we imagined Molech worship. Then what he did was he started doing Avodah Zarah exactly as HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us not to do. Tachat kol eitz ranan, hagiva, all these things. And he did everything that you can imagine was wrong. And now, just to remind you a little bit of this, let's go, we start with this battle. But we also started, I gave to you two other texts, one from Divrei Hayamim, and one also from Yeshayahu HaNavi. And to take the Divrei Hayamim, let's look at the parallel text. This time I decided to be a little bit better for all of you and not give you that tiny little print, but instead we're going to work with everyone's permission, a little bit of a larger print, and hopefully it'll work out a little better for everyone. So just to share with you the text for a moment, if you did print it out, this is the one that's identified as the top page is Yeshayahu Zion, and then the second page is Divrei Hayamim. And in this Divrei Hayamim text, we read as follows, and it's a Hebrew-English text. Ben Esrim Shana Achaz b'Malcho. Achaz was 20 years, same thing we have here. V'Sheshesrei Shana Malach b'Yerushalayim. In 16 years he ruled in Yerushalayim. V'lo asah yashar b'nei Hashem k'David Aviv. He didn't follow what Hashem wanted. It was right in the eyes of Hashem, like his father David, his ancestor David had done. Vayelech b'darchei malchei Yisrael v'gam mesechot asa leba'alim. And he followed in the ways of the kings of Israel, and he also made Baal idols. He made the idols of Baal, added into what we find. V'uiktir b'gei Ben Hinnom, and he also offered in the valley of Ben Hinnom. Vayav eret banav, okay, and he burned his children in the fire. Va'esh kito avot hagoyim asher horish Hashem mibnei bnei Yisrael. This is that action where he actually killed them. Vayizbeach vayakter b'bamot v'alagvaot v'tachat kol eitz ranan, and he also offered on bamot and on the hilltops and also under all the shady trees. Vayitneu Hashem elokav biyad melech Aram. And God gave him, as a result, as a punishment, to the king of Aram, whose name we know is Ritzin, Vayakuvo, Vayishbu mimeno shivya gedolam. And he hit him, and not only did he smite him, but he also took a great amount of captives. Now, all that we have here, if you remember, is the statement that they went against Yerushalayim. Our posuk, Az yale Ritzin melech Aram ufekach ben Remaliah melech Yisrael Yerushalayim lemilchama. Okay, that they weren't successful around Yerushalayim. We don't hear what else happened. So this battle was a massive battle, and they captured many captives. They brought them to Damascus, which is Damascus. And also, going back to Barry's point, this battle was against the northern king, Pekach ben Remaliah, as well, and he also killed many Jews of the south. 120,000 soldiers were killed by Pekach ben Remaliah, Jewish soldiers of the south. This was punishment because the south had left Hashem. Vayarog Zichri Gibor Ephraim. And Zichri from Ephraim killed at Maasehu ben Amelech, actually killed Maaseyahu, who was the son of the king, Vet Azrikam, Negid Habayit, and also he killed Azrikam, who was the chief of staff, Vet Elkanah Mishneh Lamelech, and also the viceroy Elkanah. So in other words, major figures in the government of the south were killed. Vayishbu b'nei Yisrael me'achehem 200,000, and 200,000 captives were taken from the south. Nashim banim uvanot, women, children, and women and children. V'gam shalal rav bazazu mehem, and they stole a lot of the spoils of the war. Ve'aviu et hashalal l'Shomron, and there it was taken to Shomron. So we have captives both in Damascus and in Samaria. V'shamaya navila Hashem, but there was a prophet in the north, Oded Shemo, his name was Oded. And he went out in front of the army that was going back to Samaria, and he said to them, it's only because God was angry at the southern kingdom that you were able to be victorious. And you have slain them with this anger, okay, which reached all the way up to the heavens, which means you had this vast anger here. And now you want to go ahead and you want to bring the children of Yehudah and Yerushalayim, and you want them to be your slaves. But you, okay, you're also guilty. You also have what to be concerned about. So therefore, Oded said to them, listen, you don't want to get God angry. Give back the captives. And some of the leaders of the top, Azaryahu ben Yonatan, Berachyahu ben Mishilemot, V'chizkahu ben Shalom, V'amasa ben Chadlai, ala ba'im min hatzava. And then a number of the leadership of Ephraim came up, okay, and they stood up against those who were coming from war. Vayomru lehem, lo taviu tashiva yahena. We don't want these captives here. Ki lashmat Hashem aleinu atem omrim. Because what you're going to do is you're going to get God angry at us. We're going to be guilty. Lo sifa chatatenu va'al ashmatenu. And this will make it worse for us. Ki rabah shema lanu v'charon afal Yisrael. Because we're not in such good shape to begin with. Okay, and we don't want this happening. And so the army left all of those people. They just dropped them. Okay, and those people who mentioned before, they took these captives, and all of the those Hilbishu min hashlau, all of those who were naked, they clothed them from the spoil. Vayalbishem v'yana'alum v'yachilum v'yashkum v'yisuchum v'yanahalum b'chamorim v'chol hakoshel. And they went and they fed them, they gave them shoes, they gave them to drink, they cleaned them, they carried all of those who couldn't walk, they put them on donkeys. V'yavium yirecho ira tamarim etzalachem v'yashuvu shomrim. And they brought them back to the south, to the city of Yericho, and then they went back up to the north. Be'etahi shalach hamelech Achaz al malchei Ashur la'azor. Now at that very same time, and this is the next piece we're going to get into, Achaz, who's been attacked by all sides, instead of joining into this collective, this coalition of kings against Assyria, he goes to Assyria to help him. Let's go back into our text and then we'll pick up that story from there. In our text, we are now in Pasuk Zayin. Vayishlach Achaz malachim el Tiglat Plesar. I'm sorry, I keep on calling him by the English name. Plesar. And Achaz sent to Tiglat-Pileser, Melech Ashur, Lemor, telling him, Avdecha uvincha ani. I am your servant and your son. Now, if you think about it, if he's the servant and the son, what's Tiglat-Pileser? Tiglat-Pileser is Avinu Malkeinu, is the father, the master. And so in essence, this is, he's turning to Tiglat-Pileser as we would turn to God. Alei voshi'eni mikaf melech Aram u'mikaf melech Yisrael. Come up and save me from the hands of Ritzin melech Aram and from the hands of Melech Yisrael, Hakomim alai, who are rising up against me. Vayikach Achaz, and what Achaz did was, all at HaKesef at Zahav and Nimtza Beit Hashem, he took the silver and the gold that was in the Beit HaMikdash, Uvaotzrot Beit HaMelech, and that which was in the storehouses, the treasuries of the king, Vayishlach LeMelech Ashur Shochat, and he sent a bride to Ashur. Vayishma elav Melech Ashur, and the king of Ashur listened to him. Now, I find this a very tongue-in-cheek, ironic kind of statement. Yeah, I'll pay attention now. Okay, he got all of these riches. Vayal Melech Ashur al Damasek. And as a result, Melech Ashur attacked Damascus. And remember, Damascus is the capital city of Aram. To understand the irony in all of this, what Achaz is doing is he's paying Ashur to do what they wanted to do. Ashur wanted to conquer Aram. He wanted to conquer the north. He wanted to conquer the whole coastal area of Eretz Yisrael. He wanted it. And since he wanted it, this was perfect. Not only do I get to do what I want to do, I'm going to be paid to do it. He goes up against Damascus, Vayit Pasam, and he grabs it, Vayagla Kira, and he goes out and he opens up the walls, Vetritzinimit. And he kills Ritzin, the king. Vayelech HaMelech Achaz likrat Tiglat-Pileser Melech Ashur Damasek. And then what happens is, after this defeat, Achaz goes up to Damascus, Vayaret HaMizbeach Asher b'Damasek, and he sees the altar which was in Damascus. Vayishlach HaMelech Achaz el Uriah Kohen et Dmut HaMizbeach v'tavnito l'chol ma'aseu. And he went ahead and he sees the altar that they were using for their God, and he sends detailed plans back to the Kohen. Now it's interesting, obviously he's sending detailed plans. We know this person worshiped the Molech. We know he was worshiping Avodah Zarah. We know everything. But he sends it back to the Kohen. Is a very strange thing. Does that mean that this Kohen was corrupt as well? We don't know. There is a very strange suggestion from Kogan and Tadmor, who suggest that actually all of the previous kings in the Davidic dynasty, when they were working to build the Beit HaMikdash, what they did was they were working to restore it to the prior glory in the time of Shlomo HaMelech. And maybe the reason he doesn't see the pushback from the Kohanim is what he was doing was he was saying, I'm not putting it back to the glory of David HaMelech, I'm going to improve on it. I just saw the most magnificent Mizbeach you could ever imagine. And hey, let me send you the plans for that magnificent Mizbeach, and you put it up in the Beit HaMikdash as the new Mizbeach, which could solve the conundrum of why it was the Kohen did not object in any way. It could be the Kohen didn't object because he felt his life was in danger. It could be the Kohen was corrupt. But if we want to take this Kohen and try to understand what's happening, it might be also that what he was suggesting was not a new level of evil, just a different kind of what we consider to be evil. And so what happened afterwards, Vayiven Uriah Kohen at the Mizbeach, Uriah actually builds this Mizbeach. And it was completed by the time that Uriah comes back from Damascus. And the king comes back now from Damascus. Vayar, and he sees Vayar HaMelech the Mizbeach, and the king sees the new altar. Vayikrav HaMelech al Mizbeach, and he offers the sacrifice on the Mizbeach. Vayal alav. Now, interestingly, in this pasuk, if you notice, there's something very strange in pasuk Yud Bet. We have the word Hamelech 3 times. There's an emphasis here. The Dat Mikras suggests that it could be, Lirmoz, he writes, Shechanach et HaMizbeach HaChadash B'tekes Mamlachti Rav Roshem, that this may have been a regal event, that the dedication of this new altar took on this special, approach, and he kept on saying, the king, the king, the king, because it was such a royal event that he was watching. And he completely used this Mizbeach in place of the regular Mizbeach that had been in the Beit HaMikdash. And that's what HaMizbeach HaNechoshet, Asher Lifnei Hashem, Vayakrev Meit Pnei HaBayit, Mi Ben HaMizbeach, Mi Ben Beit Hashem, V'yiten Oto Al Yerach HaMizbeach Tzafona. And according to Pasuk Yudalet, it was moved from its place. Now, we're not going to have enough time, unfortunately. I just want to go back a little bit into Divrei Hayamim, and we're going to have to finish this parak more next week. But if you look once again back at Divrei Hayamim where we left it off, because we left off at the moment where Achaz turns to Melech Ashur. And so in verse 16, it says, Ba'eta hi shalach HaMelech Achaz al Malchei Ashur la'azor lo. Achaz sent to the kings of Assyria to help him. Va'od Adomim, Bau, Vayakuv Yehuda v'yishbu Shevi. And at the same time, Edom came, and they were attacking from the southeast. Uflishtim pashtu, and from the southwest, or primarily the west, the Plishtim invaded. Be'arei Shvela v'Negev liYuda v'Yilkedu et Beit Shemesh v'et Ayalon v'et Gederot v'et Socho v'Notav v'et Timna v'Notav v'et Gimzo v'et Benotav v'Yeshvu Sham. And they also went in and they captured from all that. Gimzo, by the way, is the city where many of the documents of Tiglath-Pileser were also from. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu was punishing Yehuda for what Achaz had done. Because he had let the Jews do whatever they want, and he was treacherous with God. Vayavo alav Tiglath-Pileser melech Ashur vayatzar lo v'lo chazko. And Tiglath-Pileser came to him, but he didn't strengthen him. Ki chalak Achaz et Beit Hashem vet Beit HaMelech v'Asurim v'iten l'melech Ashur v'lo lezra lo. Okay, Achaz had taken everything out, and he gave it to the king of Ashur, but it didn't help him. Uveit hatzerlo vayosef limol b'Hashem hu hamelech Achaz, and in this time he continued to do what was wrong. Vayizbach lelo hey darmesek hamakimbo, and he was sacrificing to the gods of Damascus, which were causing him problems. Vayomer ki Elohei malchei Aram hema azrim otam lehem ezbach v'azruni. He says, hey, if Damascus, Aram is attacking me and they're succeeding, maybe I should appeal to their gods who are helping them. Maybe they'll help me. But it was the exact opposite. Vayasov Achaz et kol beit Elokim vayakatzetz et beit Elokim vayizkor et altot beit Hashem vayaslo mizbachot b'chol pinav Yerushalayim. And he, as a result, he began dismantling parts of the Beit HaMikdash, which we'll see in our text. And Avodah Zarah, the pagan worship, was all over Yerushalayim, and he built these bamot everywhere, to worship other gods, and he angered God. All the rest of the things he did. Vayishkav Achaz im avotav v'yikberu v'Yerushalayim ki lo hevi'uhu l'kibul Yisrael. However, Achaz died, but he wasn't brought to the royal place of burial. V'yilot l'Chizkiyahu v'no tachtav, and Chizkiyahu, his son, will rule in his stead. Next week, we're going to take this up from a different angle and also see what Yeshayahu Hanavi has to say about all of this, because Yeshayahu Hanavi was the prophet at the time, and Yeshayahu was not happy with what was going on, and he wasn't happy with the decisions, but Achaz chose to ignore him. Yafa, you have a question? Yafa, you're muted.
Got it. Okay, sorry. The passage you were reading from Yamim, it seemed like Achaz, unlike our text, which says Achaz initiated move towards Ashur. Ashur had already come to attack him, and he fought him off from finishing the attack.
Right, and we'll see though a different perspective of it in Yeshayahu Hanavi, who is very clear that Achaz approached Ashur, and when he approached Ashur, that this was really the ultimate sin itself that would lead ultimately to his destruction as well. Yeah.
So then how do you reconcile this to conflicting text from Divrei Yamim with both Yeshayahu and our text?
By saying that there are different points, that Ashur was still part of this battle, because the battle of Aram and the northern kingdom was really a battle against Ashur. And initially, Ashur also caused the damage to the south. And then the king, Achaz, reaches out to Ashur to create an alliance against the other kings who are attacking him. He's attacked by 4 different nations: the north, by Aram, by Edom, and by Plishtim. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I will see everyone same time, same place next week. Bye-bye. Shavua Tov.